Hi, let's talk about stakeholders. Although the role of the stakeholder is slaughtered throughout the PMBOK guide, many knowledge areas, we're going to concentrate on the project management processes for a project chapter of the PMBOK guide. For most of us, the role of a stakeholder can be severely misunderstood, as you can see in this drawing. We really don't quite understand why the PMBOK guide and other project management books spend so much time talking on the topic of stakes. I guess I misunderstood this whole thing, so let's go right ahead and start erasing all this. We may just have to start over. Let's get rid of the butcher. I guess I got off to a wrong start. What is a stakeholder? There are many definitions, and you know, all of them are quite useful, so I'm going to throw the popular ones out to you. First off, a stakeholder isn't a thing, it's a person. According to the Head First PMP book, a stakeholder is anyone who's affected directly or indirectly by scope, cost, or time on the project. In other words, the triple constraint. And by the way, we have another tutorial just on this particular topic that you might enjoy. A stakeholder has needs and expectations. They may also have, in the case of finance or executive management, a degree of risk tolerance that we need to consider throughout the project cycle. And of course, the project cycle, just as a reminder, starts off with the initiating to planning, monitor and control, and all the others, all the way up to project closure. Okay? So, there are key points in a project where a stakeholder is quite important. And these are communicated and documented throughout the PMBOK guide. Stakeholders tend to be the team, as shown right here. They can be approvers. This is sometimes executive management and your boss and finance and stuff like that. Then you've got, of course, the happy customer. The internal stakeholders tend to be those in the box, and then the external ones are those outside the box. So what is a stakeholder's role? We do tend to focus on just involving the team, and bringing in the extended stakeholders can be an afterthought, but there could be a huge benefit to doing that. So let's talk about what some of those are. First is shared ownership, where everyone has a stake in the outcome of the project. Then it's the project deliverable acceptance. And then there's, of course, customer and stakeholder satisfaction, which is vital, probably the most important of them all. In the project integration management knowledge area, the develop project charter that's highlighted right here has outcomes that involve stakeholders. For example, when a project scope is defined in the initiating process group, a stakeholder register can be created. And I do emphasize can. It's not necessary in all cases, but it can be. So this is an example of some of the elements of a stakeholder register. And this includes the name, the title, how knowledgeable they are. You can put a metric of power, in other words, how they're able to help the project succeed, with 1 being the lowest and 7 being the highest, and the interest they might have in the project, 1 being the lowest and 7 being the highest. There's all sorts of other items or characteristics you may want to include, including how influential they are, but we won't go further into that. But first, let's talk about what the roles are. And there's our stakeholder. They have an importance to the project, usually are involved, how much they influence the project, their interest in the project, and of course the expertise they bring to the project. All these factors are incredible roles that a stakeholder can play. In the project communications management knowledge area, there's also a lot of emphasis on stakeholders. You'll want to identify stakeholders in any sort of information that clearly identifies their interest or involvement and impact to the project's success. Let's talk about how to communicate with stakeholders. It's hard to believe, but there can be negative stakeholders, those that would actually love to see you fail, or that they really don't care if your project gets out on time or under budget. There are stakeholders that don't really need a level of detail that some of you unintentionally don't recognize based on their lack of response or interest. You may want to be careful to not over-communicate. So let's put together what we've learned. There's the identification of stakeholders, There's the creation of the stakeholder register, and you can use that to fine-tune the information through a technique that's called stakeholder analysis. This takes the information from the stakeholder register to put together a very impactful power interest grid. Now, we mentioned power and interest before as numbers between 1 and 7. So what I'm going to do is we're going to go through an example of that. We're going to show power on the left side. This is 1 being lowest, 7 being the highest, and interest, 1 being the lowest and 7 being the highest. Let's go through 2 examples of stakeholders. One is stakeholder D. Her name is Darlene. She's a senior manager of another organization. She has her own projects to deliver, and she is somewhat interested in the success of the project. She does have the power and the ability to pull strings or to help resource-wise if necessary. So we're going to evaluate her. So she has the power of 4, which is roughly here, and the interest of 2. So there, we've placed her. Stakeholder John is a customer, and as a user doesn't have much power to make things happen, but has high interest if the project is successful and satisfies his company's needs. You've evaluated his power to be 1 and interest to be way over to 7, very high. Most consultants and trainers love this concept of quadrants, so we're going to throw that up. Stakeholder D in quadrant 3, which is basically high power, low interest, and all they probably need to be is informed. Detail isn't quite as important to them, but be aware that they can help. We call them cheerleaders. So that's what this stakeholder is all about. Stakeholder J is in quadrant 2, which is low power, high interest. The more detail, the better, and they tend to be your backers. Other stakeholders may reside in the other quadrants, such as quadrant 1 and quadrant 4. And in quadrant 1, all you need to do is typically keep them informed. They can be viewed as opposers, or those with little to no interest, but they want to make sure that the project is proceeding. Quadrant 4, folks, are your biggest advocates. You may want to treat them with information as if they were partners. And let's hope that your development team all resides in quadrant 4. You know you've got a problem if your development team is in quadrant 1 or quadrant 2. They really do need to be up in quadrant 4. Anyways, those that are in quadrant 4 tend to be viewed as partners. So now you can see how properly analyzing the role of stakeholders can directly influence how you communicate with them. We've hopefully shown you the benefit of knowing why stakeholders are important to the success of your project. You have the ability and responsibility to fine-tune your message, so now you know.